good, all you beautiful people out there? How y'all doing today? That is fantastic. Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to the Double Diesel Sports Podcast, the podcast where we talk everything National Football League, in season, off season, it doesn't matter because it's football. I am your host, Double Diesel, and welcome to this special, very, very special championship weekend recap show of the 2023 National Football League season, 2022 National Football League season, 2023 playoffs, that is. Before we continue with the show, I'd like to ask, if you have not already, please like, subscribe, and share the video if you enjoy this content or know anybody who would enjoy this content. Helps boost my exposure, get us out to more eyes, more viewers. So if you haven't done that already and you'd like to, that would be greatly appreciated. Also, if you have not already, go follow me on Twitter at DDS_pod. And also, if you have not already, go support me on Patreon at patreon.com/Double Diesel Sports. On there, you will get exclusive content such as my weekly picks during the NFL season, as well as some exclusive draft content that is detailed out on the Patreon page. So if you have not already and you think you would like to, and you'd like to support the channel, keep this going, go support the Patreon. The link to that will be in the description down below. The link to those will be in the description down below. But let's get on with the show. So, initially, I had this all planned out last night as to what I was going to talk to you guys about. We're still 2 weeks away from the Super Bowl, so I was laying things out as far as things that I wanted to talk about. And I was like, all right, we got a set list. We got a set plan of how we're going to do this. And that was when it got completely shuffled up and blown up this morning. When literally, right as I'm about to sit down and record this, the news breaks that, you know what? I'll say it like this. Around this time last year, it was actually exactly 1 year ago today that this happened, that the greatest football player, arguably in the history of the sport, arguably the greatest player, without a shadow of doubt, the greatest quarterback to ever play the sport, Tom Brady, had seemingly announced his retirement. Or, in this case, Adam Schefter announced his retirement for him without really his full consent. So, I remember that day being like, wow, this is crazy that this day has finally come. Everyone was saying, hey, happy retirement, GOAT, happy retirement to him. And then, I don't know if you remember that day, but remember, Schefter broke that news, and then the news seemingly that followed that day was, oh, well, he's not actually retiring because the Brady camp's saying that he's not, that the report is fake, and everyone's like, did we just pop our load too early? Like, is this, what the hell is going on? It was a solid, like, week, 2 weeks, where no one knew what the hell was going on with him. And then Brady finally came out himself, posted, the stereotypical essay, retirement essay, thanking everybody, friends, family, teammates, coaches, all that stuff. And then it was official. Came from the word of the man himself. He was no longer a National Football League player. And it was like that for an entire month. Because literally, like a week before, I think actually the day before the NFL free agency period started, was when Tom Brady announced he was coming out of retirement. I remember it was the day before the free agency for the offseason. And it was like, wow. And that, of course, sparked the jokes of, man, he hates his family that much. He's like, this man spent 1 month with his family and was like, to hell with this. I'm going back and playing football. And that was a joke, but he came back, got involved with some issues as far as personal issues with his family. As we all know, he is no longer married, and if anything, the divorce kind of sparked because of his decision to return to football, to play for the Buccaneers in 2022. And we saw it this year, where he was still, I think, a top 15 to top 20 quarterback, but he was definitely not the Tom Brady of old. He was missing reads. He was missing throws that we're so used to seeing him make, missing reads we're so used to seeing him make, and missing plays that we're just so used to seeing Tom Brady make on a routine basis. And this was easily his worst season, at least in a long time. This is the first year as a starting quarterback where he finished the regular season with a losing record. First time that's ever happened. In 22 years in the NFL is the first time that's ever happened. And, it all culminated in them getting shellacked in the wild card round on Monday Night Football to end their season against the Dallas Cowboys. And then it sparked oddly enough, never sparked is he going to retire rumors. There were some rumblings, but most of it was he's definitely played his last game as a Buck. Where is he going to play from here? People were speculating the Raiders. People were speculating maybe Miami potentially. Like everyone's like, where is Tom Brady going to play football in 2023? Because it's definitely not going to be Tampa. That ship has run its course. Well, this morning we got an answer that no one was expecting except for myself, because I've kind of been saying this all season. And that was Tom Brady took it upon himself to go on his Twitter account, post a video of himself on the beach outside of his home, I imagine, in Tampa, and cut straight to the chase, announcing he is retiring for good. Those are his words. He's retiring for good this time. And everyone's kind of stunned by it. I've been saying all season, everyone's like, man, everyone was, because like I said, everyone was like, it was a foregone conclusion that he was going to be playing for another team in 2023. He was going to be playing football in 2023. And I was sitting here while everyone was saying this. I'm like, is it really a foregone conclusion? Because, look at all the things I just pointed out. He did not have a great year. This was far from his best year. Arguably, it was probably his worst season as a starter for multiple reasons. Now, not really from a statistical standpoint, but you just watch the games. And I went to a Tampa game this year. I saw it firsthand. Like, this was not the same Tom Brady that I grew up watching. This is not the same Tom Brady that I was rooting for as a Patriots fan throughout the second half of that dynasty, of that 20-year dynasty. That Tom Brady is gone. And I think he saw that as well. I think he looked at film from this year and he said to himself, God, I used to hit that constantly. Or God, I used to see that constantly. How did I not see that? And I think he's feeling like he's getting too old for the game. I think he's no longer physically as capable as he once was. Now, a physically incapable Tom Brady is still better than a majority of quarterbacks in the NFL, don't get me wrong. And he absolutely can still play to a degree, but everyone talking about like it was a foregone conclusion he was going to play next year. I was like, not really. Now, we could sit here a month from now and he's going to pull another Brett Favre and come back out, and it's like, all right, whatever. You know what? Whatever. But yeah, and everyone on Twitter, everyone everywhere is saying, like offering like their congratulations on the retirement belts at the same time saying, I'm not buying it. Me, I am buying it. I do genuinely believe that this is it. I saw it in the man's face. I can tell that this is it. And plus, why would he go back on the decision now? He not lost his family, but he lost his marriage over this. And I do genuinely believe, I feel like he would have stayed retired last year had the Adam Schefter thing not happened. Because I do genuinely believe he was really wanting to retire and stay retired. But I think because he had this whole thing planned potentially. And I think Adam Schefter kind of ruined that. And I think he came back just to spite Adam Schefter. I do genuinely believe that that was the case. And, but all that aside, let's talk about the man himself real quick. And the impact that I don't even think I need to tell you the impact he's had on the game, both in the league as well as from a global standpoint. He's one of the very few, because remember, American football is not a global sport. It's starting to come up in certain areas. You're starting to get players come up from different countries, but it's not like this global phenomenon, like, say, basketball or football for all the European viewers out there. But, yeah, and it's not a global sport like that. But yet everybody seems to know who Tom Brady is. Everyone's at least heard the name Tom Brady. Everyone's at least seen his face. So he has kind of transcended the sport in a lot of ways. And that's just off the field and from a global impact in the league. I mean, my God, what accomplishment all time does he not have? He has the most wins of any quarterback in NFL history, the most passing yards of all time by a wide margin. The all-time leader in touchdown passes, the only member of the 600 touchdown yard club of all time. Like, most wins in a postseason by a quarterback, most conference championship game appearances by a quarterback. He has more Super Bowl rings on his own than any one franchise in NFL history in the Super Bowl era. So, like, every possible record that a quarterback can achieve all time that you can possibly think of, he has it. And he is truly, every time I watched him, and I watched him for so many years in New England and in Tampa, and every single time, win after win, Super Bowl after Super Bowl, comeback, fourth quarter comeback after fourth quarter comeback, I look at him and I say to myself constantly, I will truly never see another player like this ever again. We will never see another player that can win the way Tom Brady wins and do it consistently for as long as he did ever again. We will sit here and see the elites of the league now, like Patrick Mahomes, Joe Burrow, Josh Allen, Justin Herbert, maybe Jalen Hurts could potentially enter that conversation. But Tom Brady is a true one of one. We are never going to get anybody even remotely close. And I don't want to hear anybody, like, I know I've kind of said last week, or it's like Joe Burrow is like Tom Brady 2.0. But now that Tom Brady is retired, in really reflecting on his career, I don't ever want to put they're the next Tom Brady or Tom Brady 2.0 on anyone ever again, because no one will ever be that. That is an expectation that nobody is ever going to be able to reach whatsoever in any facet. And he is by far the greatest quarterback to ever play this sport. And I say arguably the greatest player to ever play this sport. And not just in the National Football League, just in general. And to see where he came from, the fact that we're saying that about a guy who was a scrawny kid coming out of, San Mateo, California, not recruited highly whatsoever coming out of high school. He was a tall, lanky kid, had okay arm strength, got recruited by the University of Michigan, but that was really the only true D1 recruit he had. Went to Michigan, showed up as the fourth quarterback on the depth chart, worked his way up over the years. Then in his senior year, had to beat out another guy in Drew Henson, who was this incredible athlete, multi-sport athlete, who was this incredible talent, better than Brady physically in every single aspect, except when it comes to executing on the field as well as winning games. And that was what put him over the top and made him the surefire starter in Michigan, was his true ability to pull wins out of his ass and allow Michigan to win games in situations where you thought the game was lost. Finding a quarterback with a trait like that where no matter what the situation is, you always feel like you have a chance to win with that guy under center. That's a rare, you understand how rare of a trait that truly is. But yeah, he was a scrawny kid coming out of California, went to Michigan where he had to fight to the last day he went to college to get the starting job, was a sixth round draft pick, 199th overall, 6 quarterbacks taken ahead of him in the 2000 draft, came in to an organization that already had 3 quarterbacks on the roster when he was drafted, was kept on because New England was scared of losing him because they saw something in him potentially as a backup. Year 2 rolls around, works his way up to the second in the depth chart behind Drew Bledsoe. Bledsoe gets hurt. He comes in relief. And the rest is history. And for 20 straight years, he never relinquished. Almost 20 straight years, he never relinquished that starting job in New England. And from then on out, let me just go through this real quick. Since he took over for Drew Bledsoe, back on that faithful Week 2 game in 2001 against the New York Jets, Tom Brady coming in relief for Drew Bledsoe and came out with, in New England alone, in just New England, 6 Super Bowl championships, 9 Super Bowl appearances, every single year as a starter, finishing with a winning record. Only 1 year as the full-time starter where he didn't get injured, where they missed the postseason, and that was his first full year as a starter in 2002. 3-time league MVP. A 10 straight year period where they won the division every single year. They won the division every single year outside of 2 years of him as the starter, one in 2002 and the other in 2008 where he was injured in week 1. Leaves New England at the start of the 2020 season, goes to Tampa, a team that was dead in the water damn near, hadn't made the postseason since 2007 up to that point. Immediately gets them to the postseason, immediately wins a Super Bowl his first year there, and instantly just turns that team around into one of the best teams in the NFL the second he gets there. Not a lot of teams do that. You saw Payton do that when he got to Denver, but you don't see a lot of quarterbacks have that kind of impact on a team where the first year he gets there, he wins a Super Bowl. You could say Matthew Stafford as well, but that was an all-star team for that Rams team had. You couldn't really say that about that Bucs team, though they did have a lot of really good to great players on there, but Tom Brady really took them over the hump. And yeah, we will never see another player like him for as long as we live. And I know it was fun to hate on him. I know it was fun to be like, oh, God, he's kind of ruining the sport because he gets all the calls and shit like that. But we really got to sit back and it's like, appreciate what you have when you have it, because just like that, it could be gone. And I think he's finally gone. And I really do mean, like, we will never see another quarterback, another player like him step foot into this league ever again. So, Tom Brady, if this really is legit, happy retirement. 2028 is going to be a big year. For those of you who don't get that, 2028 will be the first year he will be eligible to be inducted into the Pro Football Hall of Fame. And what a day that's going to be. I can only imagine who the other members of that 2028 class could potentially be. With Tom, like everybody else, and then Tom Brady in it. So that's going to be really, really fascinating. But yes, Tom, happy retirement, brother. Happy retirement indeed. But now, on to the original plan for what this show was supposed to be. And that is conference championship game recaps. And we're going to start off with the NFC championship game. For those of you who are with me, I was streaming both conference title games on Sunday. I was there all day, both games. One game was fun, other kind of wasn't. But both things have really big things to talk about. And the first is this NFC championship game between San Francisco 49ers and the Philadelphia Eagles. And I expected this to be a lot more competitive than it was. Now, a lot of that was because of a topic that I'm going to talk about a little more in depth later. But yeah, this just never really felt like a truly competitive game. This felt like it was the Eagles' game from the start all the way to the finish. And there was nothing the 49ers could have done to stop it. They were a machine. And it almost felt like it was inevitable that the way that game was played, it was like, yeah, the Eagles reaching the Super Bowl was an inevitability. And I thought the Niners were going to put up a little more fight because their roster was so talented, because they were coming in on a 12-game winning streak. But they just came in, and there's no really other way to say it. They got the shit kicked out of them. They got the shit kicked out of them by an excellent, excellent Philadelphia Eagle football team. And I'm going to talk about the Niners a little bit. And I think a part of the reason why this game wasn't so competitive was because Brock Purdy got injured the first drive of the game. The first 49er drive of the game. He gets strip sacked by Hassan Reddick, where he gets hit in the arm, ball goes up, and the Eagles fall on it. But on that hit, it's been officially diagnosed as a UCL tear in his elbow of his throwing arm. And that basically should have knocked him out for the game. And he was out for the rest of the first quarter, out for the entirety of the second quarter, and the first drive of the second half. And and you saw it like in the first quarter where he was going up to Kyle Shanahan, and you saw him mouthing, "I can't go. I can't throw. I'm not able to throw it." And at first we thought it was a nerve thing, and we're like, all right, he'll just ice it up. He'll be back in soon. But now the reports after the game show it was clearly much more severe than that. And the Niners were basically quarterbackless for the rest of the game, and they were playing for the rest of the first half with Josh Johnson as their quarterback. He was a practice squad quarterback that they brought onto the practice squad halfway through the season. So it was kind of like at that point it was writing on the wall like, yeah, the Niners are not winning this football game. I know they have a lot of talent, and Christian McCaffrey broke off a really impressive touchdown run, which ended up being the only points of the game for the 49ers. But when you have Josh Johnson as your quarterback on the biggest stage possible, at least at this point in time, you're not expected to win, especially not against an Eagles team like that. And it was almost kind of brutal to watch in a lot of ways. And then, to make matters even worse, Josh Johnson gets knocked out of the game with a concussion. So Brock Purdy, who has a ligament in his elbow torn, I should say, now has to be put back into the ball game because the only other active quarterback on the roster was injured, and Jimmy Garoppolo was inactive for this game. So you only had two active quarterbacks to play today. That was Purdy and Johnson. Both got hurt. And you were looking at a situation where Kyle Juszczyk was your emergency quarterback. And you're like, we don't want to do that. So Brock, we don't know the diagnosis yet at that point. But it's like, at that point, they were just like, hey, man, you just got to go in there. Because at this point, we don't have a choice. And you saw it, like when Brock Purdy came back into the game, they threw a total of one pass play, and that was a screen pass to Christian McCaffrey. Other than that, from that point on, they just ran the football nonstop because he couldn't throw it. He physically could not throw the football, and it was. And here's the thing: even if Brock Purdy didn't get injured, even if he didn't suffer that UCL tear, I don't think it would have made that much of a difference because of just how dominant that Eagles team was and how dominant this Eagles team has been. And it just really did feel like this was the Eagles' day to come out on top and ride to the Super Bowl. And the Niners, as great of a team as they are, just felt like a stepping stool. And that really, to me, says a lot about this Eagles team, is they just went up against arguably the best roster in the NFL in the San Francisco 49ers from a talent perspective. And yet they were treated like a stepping stone for the Philadelphia Eagles. Like, we knew this Eagles team was good. We knew this Eagles team was great. We didn't think they were this great, though, where they go up against one of the 4 best teams in the NFL and just piss and shit all over them. And it really goes to show, I'm going to have, going into next week, the week of the Super Bowl, I'm going to have an official preview show of the Super Bowl. I'm not going to get too in-depth in it today, or else we'd be here forever considering the things I want to talk about. But yeah, it really just show just how great this Eagles team is, how great Jalen Hurts has been, how great Nick Sirianni as a coach has been, and it's really been a joy to watch. And the 49ers, what the plan for the offseason is first of all, you're going to have a quarterback controversy on your hands next year. And that comes down to who's the starter for 2023. Is it Trey Lance or is it Brock Purdy? It's going to be a tough decision because of how Purdy played in the latter half of the season. But at the same time, he did invest so much into Trey Lance. And it's going to be rough. It's going to be a rough decision for them. It's a great decision to have if you're an organization where it's like, hey, you feel like you can win with 2 guys, but which one do you go with? But it is still a tough decision to try and come to make. But that's a decision later in the offseason. Right now, you're just focused on both guys getting healthy because both guys suffered season-ending injuries. So, and by the way, whoever the strength and conditioning coach for the 49ers is, fire him. Fire him now. Because how many injuries to star players has this team suffered over the past 3 seasons? How many? It's getting ridiculous at this point. So, honestly, just San Francisco, just try and maintain the roster you have now, because you do have a roster that can compete for a Super Bowl next year for sure. And we'll just have to we'll have to wait till training camp to see what the quarterback situation is going to be looking like. So that's it. That's all I'm going to have to say on that. Like I said, I'm not going to go too much on the Eagles because I feel like if I go and talk more about the Eagles, I'm just going to be repeating things I've said in the past. And plus, like I said, I'm going to be having a full Super Bowl preview for next week's show. But we're going to move on to the AFC Championship game now. And what a game. First of all, what a game. This was everything a championship game should be like. And, those of you who are watching the game, I'm just going to get out of the way now. Those of you who are watching the game with me notice that I was hyped, I was excited, and then in the middle of the fourth quarter, I just sort of teetered off and just sort of was just out of it. And that was strictly because of the officiating debacle that was at the 9.5 minute mark of the fourth quarter, I think it was. I don't even remember specifically because I've tried to wipe that moment out of my mind. Where it was, if you haven't seen it yet, and I'm sure you probably have by now, but just in case you haven't, it was a situation where it was a 3rd and 9. Ball game was tied at this point, I believe. And it was a 3rd and 9 for the Kansas City Chiefs. They go for it. They complete it to Travis Kelce, short of the sticks. Out comes the punting unit. Now, I can't hear what's going on because I have my TV muted because of copyright issues. I don't want sound picking up and then get a copyright strike. I'm iffy on that. But anyway, I just see like them showing the refs constantly and there's a stoppage and I'm like, I don't know what's going on. Something's going on, and I was thinking, I'm like, all right, there's probably an issue with the time or whatever. And then all of a sudden, I see the offense going back on the field, and I'm like, okay, they're going for it. And then I look at the graphic, and it went from a 4th and 4 back to a 3rd and 9. And at that point, I lose it because I'm like, what the fuck is happening? Y'all were with me. Y'all saw it. I was like, what the fuck is going on? And then here we go again. 3rd and 9. Once again, Mahomes gets sacked. I'm like, thank God. And then flag throws. Eli Apple called for holding because he's Eli Apple. So, of course, he did. And then that moved the chains. Fresh set of downs. Now, the Chiefs did eventually punt on that next series of downs. But still, it's just like, and I know you saw I will say, in the defense of the refs, there was one ref that did come in waving his hands, blowing his whistle right before the snap. You saw it on the sky cam where there was a ref at the top of the field coming down, waving his arms, blowing his whistle to try and get the play dead, and he was doing that before the ball was snapped. But then the ball was snapped and the play was running, and instead of the ref continuing to run forward and blowing his whistle, he just stops. He just stops in his tracks. And I can't explain it. I don't understand it. But the play was run. And they already marked it 4th and 4. They were bringing out the punt unit. And then the refs were just like, nah, you get a do-over. That's what it looks like. That's what it looked like to the naked eye, is the Chiefs were allowed a do-over for next to no good reason. And I know like I just said, there was a ref trying to come in and stop it, but he didn't try hard enough. And, that started the whole hashtag rigging thing. I've always kind of like, I've never been a believer in that. I've never believed that the league has been rigged. Or do I believe the league favors certain teams? Do I think the league favors certain teams? Yes. Do I think the NFL allows certain star players, certain players to get away with a lot more stuff than average players do? Yes, the NBA does it a lot, where the top players get the benefit of the doubt. But I've never believed in this whole the NFL's trying to get a certain matchup. They're trying to get a certain matchup in there. Because I believe if that would have been the case, then last year's Super Bowl would have been Chiefs-Rams. That would have been the more appealing matchup to the casual fan last year, would have been Chiefs-Rams in the Super Bowl. But that's not what we got. So I don't think that rigging happens in the NFL, or at least not from the league directly. But when you see stuff like that, it just you kind of get stuck in your tracks because you're like, how can you argue against it at that point when you see something like that blatant of a fuck up by the refs? And it's stuff like that where it's just like, this is why we want robot refs. And yeah, I'm done talking about it because it just pisses me off. I just want to talk about the game. And the reality of the game is, and watching it back, is that ref debacle or no ref debacle, the Cincinnati Bengals had multiple chances to win this game, and they just couldn't capitalize on it. That's just straight up how it is. They just could not Like, the defense couldn't get off the field when they needed to. The offense couldn't move the football when they absolutely needed to. And they shot themselves in the foot a lot of times. And the big play was, obviously, the one at the last play was Joseph Asai hitting Patrick Mahomes when he was clearly out of bounds. And I know it's a whole, like, well, you can't stop your momentum and sort of thing. Patrick Mahomes had, like, solid full foot, 2 feet out of bounds right as Osai hit him. So, yeah, it was the right call. It was the right call, and it was a costly penalty that set him up officially in a field goal range. And they sent out Harrison Butker to win the game. And just like that, the Kansas City Chiefs are heading to the Super Bowl. Now, the Bengals, I wouldn't hang your heads too low, because at the end of the day, they were with them right to the end. You can now say all 4 Chiefs-Bengals games have been decided by 3 points. All 4 games between these two teams have been decided by 3 points. But it really did come down to the Bengals just couldn't capitalize on certain opportunities when they had them. And, like, and that a lot of it has to do with, yes, you were missing 3 your starting offensive linemen. I mean, that's kind of what the Achilles heel was for this Bengals team last year, was their offensive line was terrible. They were healthy, but they were terrible. So it really does. And they just ran into a Kansas City machine that was sick of the narrative. And honestly, I should have saw this coming when the mayor of Cincinnati tried to fucking pull a Amari and be like, Joe Burrow is the father of Patrick Mahomes. And the second I saw that, and I was like, God damn it, the Chiefs are going to win. The second I fucking saw that, I was like, fuck, the Chiefs are going to win. But I tried denying it. I tried denying it to myself. Yes, I try to be like, I'm going to be honest, I try to be neutral, like during streams and on here, but I'm gonna be honest, I have my biases, and I'm gonna be honest, I wanted a Bengals-Eagles Super Bowl. I'm gonna be honest here. I kinda did. But regardless of that, we're still gonna get a fun Super Bowl. Chiefs-Eagles, and like I said, I'm gonna dive more into the matchup itself and the preview next week's show. But for Cincinnati, it was, I know we all like to blame the refs, but you had chances, and you couldn't capitalize on it. You always got next year. And I do think the Bengals are going to come back next year stronger than ever. Now, that Joe Burrow contract is going to be fascinating. And what they do with the rest of their skill position players because of that potential contract is going to be fascinating. So that's a story that we're going to have to see when we cross it. But that's all I have to say on that. But now, to the final bit of the show, I want to talk about some head coaching hirings. Now, as we know, there were five head coaching openings right at the end of the 2022 season. 2 were from situations where the coaches were fired in the middle of the season. The other 3 were fired right after. And out of those 5 positions, 3 of them have been filled. And we're going to go in order of when they were filled, starting with the Carolina Panthers and the hiring of Frank Reich to be their next head coach. Now, this one, I will have a little egg on my face because at the end of the season, when I was given a preview on the openings and what positions looked more appealing compared to others, this was one that I even said I was hesitant to say was a true opening because I thought Steve Wilkes did such a fantastic job with them right after Matt Rule was fired and deservingly fired. And so I thought for sure that they were just going to roll with Steve Wilkes going into next year because I thought he earned that job. But I was wrong. I was wrong because they were out. They were interviewing guys, and now they have a new head coach in former Indianapolis head coach Frank Reich, who himself was fired in the middle of the season. But despite my disappointment that Wilkes was not given the job, I still think it was a really good hire. I just think this was a down year for Frank Reich in Indianapolis. I think the ship had kind of ran its course there. I think Jim Irsay was kind of sick of having Frank Reich there. Because remember, Frank Reich was not even the head coach he originally wanted. The head coach he originally wanted was Josh McDaniels, who accepted the job. He was hired, and then that same day, as he was on the tarmac, was said, nah, fuck this, and just went back to New England. So Reich was not really his immediate choice. So, but I will say, though, him getting fired in the middle of the year by the Colts was surprising. And, but here we are. He is back on his feet. He's got a new job in Carolina. Frank Reich, the man who was the first ever starting quarterback for the Carolina Panthers back when they were an expansion team in 1995. You know, it's kind of come full circle officially. It's become full circle. The team's first ever starting quarterback, team's new head coach. And he's got, I thought, out of all the head coaching openings, I thought Carolina was one of, if not the most appealing place to go, because you still have a lot of core talent there, and guys like Brian Burns and DJ Moore and Jeremy Chin, etc. You know, a young stud on the offensive line in Ike Mekwonu, and a good running game that developed late in the year with guys like Deontay Foreman and Chuba Hubbard. And I looked at this situation, I'm like, this isn't really that bad of a situation that the Panthers have, considering they were in a situation where they traded Christian McCaffrey at the deadline, and they looked like they were in a spot where they were waving the white flag and just chucking everything off board to try and get as much draft picks in return. And instead, they showed a lot of life in the latter half of the season to the point where they actually had a legitimate chance to win the NFC South. And they really just show that, like, hey, they could be something in a few years. Give them a real quarterback, because yes, Sam Darnold played relatively well, but he's Sam Darnold. But this is a team that's just like, hey, there are a few pieces. Give them a quarterback, build a little more, and 2-3 years, you can really have something potentially. And I do think Frank Reich can be the right guy to lead that ship. So, overall, I think this is a really good hiring by the Carolina Panthers. I really do think that Frank Reich can get the most out of this. Because especially considering I think Carolina actually has this might be controversial to say, but I think Carolina might actually have a better situation than what the Colts had. So, at least as a starting point. So, yeah, man, great hiring for the Carolina Panthers, and I'm excited to see what happens to that franchise in the next couple of years. Now, the next hiring was so these next two happen on the same day. I'm going to talk about the first one, and then I'm going to talk about the big one last. The first one was the Houston Texans, the worst team arguably in league history to not receive the number 1 overall pick. The Houston Texans, a team that's been dead in the water for the last 2 years. Really, for the last 2 years, just hiring. They've gone 2 straight years of hiring really stopgap coaches. They hired David Culley to be the head coach in 2020. Clearly a stopgap guy, because he was hired after being the Ravens wide receiver coach. And everyone, when they hired him, they were like, who the hell is David Culley? And he had stopgap coach written all over him, and he was fired after 1 year, and they're like, all right, who's the next guy going to be? And then they hired Lovie Smith, who was their defensive coordinator under Culley, and I'm just like, all right, Lovie Smith, he's a former 2-time head coach himself, but Lovie Smith in 2022? Like, okay. And it was another situation where it's just like, okay, Houston, are you just going to do like what the Colts do with their quarterback situation, and they just rotate head coaches every year? That's not really a way to build a franchise. But, and I said, when they fired Lovie Smith, and I said they weren't going to fire him, or I thought they weren't going to fire him, because I was like, There's no way they're going to go 2 straight years of one and doneing their head coach. There's no way. I've never seen a team do that. And yet they did. And I was like, all right, well, this year you have to get now, third time's the charm. You have to get a guy that you can sit behind for 3-4 years, give him a chance to really build this thing up from the ground, because there's not a lot to build up here. There is not a lot here to work with. Yes, you still have Brandon Cooks and Laramie Tunsil still there, and retaining those guys in the last offseason was huge. But other than those guys, you do not have anything to work with. So you have to give it to a real head coach that you're going to give a real opportunity that doesn't feel like a stopgap, and give him 3 to 4 years to really try and build this thing up from the ground, because this thing is going to it's going to be a long time for this team before this team is ready to compete. And they did that. And they got the hottest head coaching commodity on the market. And former 49er defensive coordinator Demeco Ryans has officially been hired as the head coach of the Houston Texans. And what a hiring it is. It's kind of been a theme for the last few years where 49er assistants on the offensive to defensive side have really become these hot coaching commodities under Kyle Shanahan. It really just goes to show the tree that Kyle Shanahan is able to put himself together year after year. And it's one of the reasons why I do think Kyle Shanahan, despite having yet to win a Super Bowl, is still arguably the best head coach in the NFL, if not a top 5 or 3 head coach in the NFL. But we're not talking about him. We're talking about Demeco Ryans. And he has really turned that 49er defense, a 49er defense that everyone thought was going to fall off a cliff a little bit. Not fall off a cliff, but definitely take significant steps back after Robert Saleh left and took the head coaching job at the Jets. And he came in and arguably made that defense even better. Like, you saw it, outside of the NFC title game, but for most of the year, they were extremely well coached. They were extremely disciplined. They had impact players everywhere on the defense. And they had a killer pass rush. They had a killer linebacking core, an underrated secondary for the most part. And Demeco Ryans was just a masterclass at defensive scheming, defensive coaching, and it was really just fascinating to watch. And everyone was like, it's only a matter of time before this guy becomes a head coach. And it did not take long, because here he is, the head coach of the Houston Texans, and it's a well-deserved hiring, and I think Houston couldn't have gotten a better hire. Now, in a year or two, this could completely blow up in my face, and it turns out he sucks and he's not ready to be a head coach yet. But as of right now, I feel like he's good enough, and I feel like he's going to start bringing some of his guys in, probably most of them from the Shanahan system, to come in and really coach this team up. And I think the Texans got a good one. I said they needed to not get a stopgap anymore, and they needed to get a true head coaching candidate that they could really get behind, and I feel like they got the best one they possibly could have gotten. So hats off to the Houston Texans for right now, and because I think they hit the nail on the head. Now, this could come back and bite me in the ass, and I'm saying that, but I'm saying that this could absolutely come back and bite me in the ass in a couple of years. But as of right now, in this moment in time, I think they got the absolute right hire for sure. But that should have been the big news. That should have been the big news yesterday. Instead, and this is what I'm going to wrap the show up with, the how do I even introduce this without just straight up coming out and being like, oh yeah, this happened. So it's been no secret that Sean Payton's retirement last year was not a true retirement. I do think he was like, I need to take a break, but I don't think a true full-on retirement was in the deck of cards, really, for Sean Payton. I do think he was burnt out. I think he wanted to take a break, for sure. But everyone figured he was going to get back into coaching one way or another. And here we were with, you know, all these head coaching hirings, or not hirings, all these head coach openings. And the one name that kept jumping around from team to team, all 5 of these teams, was, are they going to get Sean Payton? That was the one guy everyone was talking about, was, are they going to get Sean Payton? Who's going to get Sean Payton out of retirement? What are they going to have to give up to get the rights in order to hire Sean Payton? And because remember, the New Orleans Saints, even though he was retired and wasn't their head coach anymore, they still held the rights to his contract. So a team, if they wanted to hire him, they were going to have to give up something in order to get him. And that team, because of course it was this team, was the Denver Broncos. As if they hadn't blown up their future enough with the Russell Wilson trade, they decided to do it again with the hiring of Sean Payton to be their head coach. And I actually do not have the compensation pulled up right in front of me. Hold on one moment as I get to that. All right, I got it pulled up right here. So, in this trade, the Denver Broncos receive the rights to Sean Payton and the New Orleans Saints 2024 third-round pick in exchange for the New Orleans Saints receiving Denver's first-round pick this year, as well as a second-round pick next year. Now, some of you might be wondering, wait, didn't they give up their first-round pick this year to the Seattle Seahawks? And I had that same thought initially, and I thought I misread it a few times. But then I remembered, oh, wait, they got a first-round pick for the Bradley Chubb trade with the Miami Dolphins. So they had the 30th pick, and that was the pick they gave up to the New Orleans Saints. And now the New Orleans Saints hold that pick. So, which is the 30th overall pick in the draft. So, yeah. And just like that, Sean Payton is the new head coach of the Denver Broncos. And I'm torn on this because Sean Payton is a phenomenal coach. I think he's going to get that team back on the right track. I do think Sean Payton is what this team needed because Nathaniel Hackett was such a train wreck and he was so in over his head that he had no business being even close to being a head coach. Sean Payton is the right guy to coach this team as a whole. Now, there's only one question left with the Denver Broncos, and that is what to do with Russell Wilson. Because I feel like you can blame a lot of Russell Wilson's failures last year on Nathaniel Hackett's system and Nathaniel Hackett not being that good of a coach. But also, when you watch film on him, it was clear that Russell Wilson was, scheme or no scheme, he was just not good last year. And there were even a lot of plays last year where you watch him and you're just like, you can't blame this game. Like, him missing reads, missing wide open guys, overthrowing guys, not hitting guys when he usually should. Like, you can't blame that on coaching. You can't blame that on the scheme. He's what? How many years has he been in the league? 10 years now? A guy who was at one point a top 5 quarterback in the NFL. Like, he was doing things that it's just like, you should know that you can't do that. You know you should hit that. You know you can read the defense like that. So, and his athleticism starting to take a little bit of a hit as well because he is getting up there in age. Now, I will say, though, Sean Payton has won for years. He won a Super Bowl with a quarterback in Drew Brees, who, again, was knocked because he was short. He was on the shorter aspect of quarterbacks. But Russell Wilson and Drew Brees are two completely different players. In their primes, they were two completely different players because Brees was nowhere close to the athlete that Russell was. But Brees was so much better in structure than Russ was and is. Brees could run occasionally. He didn't run much, but when he did run, he was more of like a lower the shoulder, try and run over a motherfucker. Hell, Brees said it himself. He's like, why try and juke a guy when you could just run over him? So he wasn't, because he knew he wasn't an athlete like that. And Russell Wilson in his prime was an athlete like that. And historically, Russell Wilson has not been great in structure, and Breeze was phenomenal in structure. So, yeah, I know everyone's saying, like, oh, like, Breeze and Russ are the same player. Yeah, in height alone. They're style-wise, they're two completely different players. And I know Russ said last year that he wants to be more of like a player from the pocket because he is starting to get into his 30s, and he's not the athlete he once was. So I understand him why, just to prolong his career a little longer. But he's shown he's not been great in structure, and last year he showed when he tried playing in structure he was really fucking bad. So but I do think Sean Payton will try and work the best out of Russell Wilson. Now, if we get to 2023 and Russell Wilson hasn't shown that much improvement from last year, then at that point I'm going to be like, all right, Russ is a problem. But we'll just have to wait and see. And all in all, though, as far as the rest of the roster goes, I think Sean Payton's been a great hire for the rest of the roster because Payton's going to bring in his guys. And he's really going to, I think, especially on the offensive side of the ball, he's going to get the most out of that offense that really, I think this year's Broncos or 2023's Broncos is going to be what we thought the 2022 Broncos offense was going to be. And that is if Russ's problems are fixed. But we'll just have to wait and see on that. And it is risky because you did give up a lot of future again. You did that with Russell Wilson, and you're kind of testing fate again with Sean Payton. And if it doesn't work out, you're really putting your organization in a bind here. But yeah, for the most part, I think it was a good hire for the most part. And it really just, especially with this Broncos team, it's just going to come down to a wait and see sort of thing. Whereas with the other two hires, I do feel really good about. With this one, it's more of a we'll wait and see sort of thing. And that, ladies and gentlemen, is going to put a wrap on the show here today. Like I said, I will be doing a Super Bowl preview for next week's show, hence why I didn't get really too much into it this week. I will be doing that next week, the week of the Super Bowl. Once again, if you have not already, go like, subscribe, and share the video if you know anybody who enjoys this content. And if you yourself enjoy this content, if you have not done that already, there we go. And also, if you're not already, go follow me on Twitter at DDS_pod and go support me on Patreon at patreon.com/DoubleDieselSports. The link to those will be in the description down below. With that being said, I'm Double Diesel. Peace.